Janet here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're back in the PMDG 737 and we're in beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And today on the channel we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about ETOPS. What is ETOPS? ETOPS stands for Extended Range Twin Engine Operation Performance Standards. And it is a procedure developed to allow twin engine aircraft to do oceanic flights more than 1 hour away from suitable airports. So I'm not going to go too in depth on all the ETOPS stuff. I've done a fair amount of ETOPS flying, and I just want to discuss it because I've seen a lot of times when you see YouTubers doing across the pond flights that they really don't talk about what ETOPS is and what the procedures are you need to do for those type of flights. They just more or less enter a route, oceanic route, and then just take off and fly it without any consideration for what ETOPS is. So I thought I'd just cover it off briefly here and talk about it a little bit and how to set it up in your airplane and how to monitor your ETOPS flight as you're going across the pond. So today we're going to do a flight from Halifax, Nova Scotia to Edinburgh, Scotland. It's about a 5-hour flight, and it's quite common for narrow body airplanes to do these type of flights, and today we're in a Sunwing plane and we're going to do our flight across the pond. So I'll just give you a quick overview of ETOPS first, and then we'll get the airplane set up and get up on our way. I'll just take a minute to say, if you're new to the channel, welcome along. And if you haven't subscribed, take the time and hit that subscribe button, sign up for notifications, and then you'll see future videos like this when I release them. And for those of you who already subscribed to the channel, welcome aboard again. Thanks for joining me again for another flight. And so without further ado, let's just talk a little bit about what ETOPS is. So ETOPS was developed to allow twin engine aircraft to operate on oceanic routes. Prior to that, when you operated a aircraft with less than 2 engines, you had to stay within 1 hour travel distance with 1 engine inoperative of a suitable alternate. So in order to fly oceanic, for example, on our trip that we're going to do today, we would have to use probably an alternate in Greenland, Iceland, and stay within 1 hour. So we'd have to, these would be the 1 hour zero wind distances, and for the 737 it's just under 400 knots, and you'd have to stay basically within 400 nautical miles of suitable alternates all the way across. Well, ETOPS allows you to go outside of that range. So basically, once you get an hour away from your departure airport, you can fly in this segment now that's more than 1 hour away from suitable alternates. And your ETOPS certification is based on the level of ETOPS that your airline has applied for and what your airline has been accepted to fly. So it's based on your maintenance, your historical performance, your training, all that stuff. So there's different ETOPS criteria. ETOPS 120 means you can go up to 2 hours away from suitable alternate airports. ETOPS 180 is up to 3 hours away. So you have different classifications, and that's, I'm not going to get into all that, but there's different ratings of for how far you can go away from suitable alternates. So for this trip today, we're going to be ETOPS 120, so we have to maintain within 1 hour and 20 minutes of a suitable alternate. And so it allows us now to fly more of a straight line, which saves time and fuel. And so that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to have suitable alternates, and I'll go over our flight plan here in a minute, but we're going to have suitable alternates that will allow us to do that. So this is just a quick diagram from, I got it from Wikipedia. It's really interesting. If you want to just look it up on the internet, just go to Wikipedia, search for ETOPS, and it explains the history of ETOPS and everything in there. Okay, so let's go over our flight plan for today's flight. Okay, here we are in SimBrief, and what I have done is I've just put in my ran the flight plan, and I just put in Halifax and Edinburgh, generated an alternate for us of Manchester, and it gave us the routing. And it's automatically created an ETOPS flight plan segment for us. And so there's nothing you really have to do. That does that automatically, but you can alter that if you need to. And we're also scheduled to go across on one of the NAT tracks, and these are North Atlantic tracks that are generated, I believe, every 12 hours, depending on the easterly, westerly flow. And in order to fly in this area of oceanic airspace, you have to fly on these NAT tracks, and they're wind optimized to minimize the spacing so they can maximize the number of aircraft that are flying across these oceanic routes. Outside the NAT tracks, you can just fly random routing, whatever is wind optimized. But if you're within this area, you have to fly on these North Atlantic tracks. So just if we look at the map here, I'll just go over what the ETOPS has generated for us. So you see we're departing Halifax, and it has generated a flight plan based on an ETOPS entry from St. John's. So this is after we're 1 hour from St. John's on one engine, so about 400 miles from St. John's, we are going to be entering the ETOPS segment. And we're going to be exiting based on Shannon, Ireland, and that's our exit point. So this is within 1 hour of Shannon. And our ETOPS alternate en route is going to be lodges in the Azores Islands down south here. And you can see this is within 2 hours. This is a 2 hour ring, and these equal time points are based on exiting or entering from St. John's and exiting from Shannon. So you'll see as we look in here, once we get to this point here, which are ETOPS entry point based on St. John's, Newfoundland, we're now in the ETOPS segment. And if anything happens between this point here, the ETOPS entry point, and ETP1, you can see ETP1 is based on anything prior to ETP1, we go back to St. John's. Anything after ETP1, we go to lodges. And then after we, so between ETP1 and ETP2, if we have any issues, we divert to lodges. If we have an engine problem or a pressurization problem or anything like that, any kind of emergency that requires a diversion. And then once we hit ETP2, this is based on, so prior to ETP2, we continue on to lodges, but after ETP2, we continue on to our suitable alternate, which is Prestwick in this case, Echo Golf Papa Kilo, and that is a suitable alternate. And you could use Shannon if that weather was suitable for Shannon. Maybe it's not suitable, but this is what our exit point is based on. So that's the nearest airport within 1 hour distance. So that's basically the ETP segment. So in order to properly fly this route, you have to have certain things set up so that you know if you have any issues where you have to divert to. So you need to put these points in your flight plan, and then you need to know when your ETOPS segment starts. And then if you have any issue once you're in the ETOPS portion of the flight, you need to know all times where you have what your diversion airport's going to be and where it is and the best way to get there. So that's the basic flight plan. Let's hop in the airplane now and get everything loaded up and get up on our way. Also, before we get going, I just wanted to show you the top segment in your flight plan. So this is your operational flight plan that prints up, and you have your normal settings here for your average cruise index, your cost index, your winds, your fuel requirements, all your waypoint information. And just below that, you're going to come into the ETOPS portion of the flight plan. So this talks about the your ETOPS, all your ETOPS waypoints. So you have your entry point and your ETP1 point, ETP2, and your exit point. talks about what your alternate weather requirements. So we need 602. This is in kilometers, so 3.2. So 602 is your weather requirements for all your ETOPS suitable airports. And so this is where you get this information, and when we need to go look at entering ETP1 in our flight plan and ETP2 in our flight plan, this is where you're going to get the lat longs for them. They're also probably in your, they're also up here in your legs page for your, your waypoints. So you have ETP1 and ETP2 as well. You can enter, and you see where they fit into the flight plan. So basically ETP1 goes after this lat long and prior to this one, and we'll use that information as well when we set that up in our FMC. So that's where the information lies in your operational flight plan. And another thing I'll show you here real quick is just where the ETOPS information can be altered if you need to alter it for any reason. So this is already the generated flight plan. So if I have to go back now and if I edit the flight plan, so it'll give me the edit options, and I'll just go down. So now you'll see here we have an ETOPS scenario prior to editing the flight plan. So if I want, I can customize that, so I can auto calculate it, and it's going to auto calculate my ETOPS and give me the suitable alternates that I need for this routing. But if I want to add another alternate for any reason, or if I want it to change, say I wanted to use Shannon here as the exit point, or as the suitable alternate for the second ETOPS segment, I could just change that, add that in instead of Echo Golf Papa Kilo, which is Prestwick. So you can change it. You can change your ETOPS scenario, so you can make it 180 ETOPS, or you can, 90 ETOPS, depending on the certification of your airline that you're flying. So if everything is suitable, if you're happy with that, you can leave it the same. It auto generates this. And if you need 180 ETOPS, it's going to base it on 180 ETOPS. So that's all going to be done for you. But if you're restricted to 120 ETOPS, you can come in and force that route, and then maybe now you're going to have to fly maybe a more northern route and fly closer to Iceland in order to make that happen. So there's lots of options you can use for your ETOPS setup here. But generally it auto generates and does everything for you. But that's where you can edit it if you need to. Okay, so let's just hop in the plane now and go over the FMC setup and make sure we have everything ready to go. Okay, here we are in the cockpit. I have pretty much everything ready to go. I have our flight plan all loaded up in the FMC. And what we'll do is just run over a quick ETOPS checklist just to make sure we have everything done, and a couple of considerations that you want to do before you conduct an ETOPS flight. So obviously you need to review your operational flight plan, which we've done. We've looked at our ETOPS suitable airports that we're going to be using for this flight. We want to make sure that we have no equipment failures on the aircraft that are going to affect the ETOPS portion of the flight, such as FMC, IRS, stuff like that. You pretty much need everything serviceable on your aircraft. You need to complete a full IRS alignment. So we've aligned the IRSs. They're already up in nav mode there. But you also need to, when you do that, verify the position. So we'll just double check the position here. So we go to position, and we've already aligned the IRSs, so everything's already aligned. But we need to confirm that, and where you get that from is the charts where you see your gate position. So we're at gate 24, so it should be north 4453.3 and west 06330 decimal 9, and that corresponds to the position on here. So that's pretty good. And you can be 0.1 or 0.2 off on these, because you can see these cover multiple gates sometimes, so that's acceptable. But as long as you're in the ballpark, you can have a minor error with that, but you're just verifying that your IRSs are aligned properly before you start this oceanic flight. So that's that. And the next thing we need to do is enter our ETOPS entry point. So there's different ways you can get it from the flight plan, which is a lat long, and I think SimBrief uses winds to calculate that, and so it's been a little off from what what uh, what I use to do the ETOPS entry point. So our ETOPS entry is going to be based on 1 hour single engine operations from St. John's CYYT. So for us, all we do is we create a fix CYYT, and then we put in the distance, which is 394, based on single engine operations with zero wind. And that's all we use to determine our ETOPS entry point. So what you get for the lat long and the flight plan might be a little bit different. This is what I'm going to use. And then when you range out, you see that, we'll see that when we go into plan mode here. And you can see that's the ring that shows up. That's this side of St. John's because we're leaving Halifax. But if I go to the legs page here, and we just step through, so you see there's St. John's there, and that's the ring. And then need to range out a little bit more here. So I gotta go back through. So there's St. John's, and there's our ETOPS entry point. So when we cross this line is when we start the ETOPS segment. So that's what we're going to use for our ETOPS entry point, and that's pretty much all we need to do for now. The rest we can do once we get airborne, and we can throw in our ETPs and stuff like that as we're en route. So now we have the ETOPS entry point based on St. John's here. So we'll get started up and we'll get up on our way, and I'm going to do that offline here just to save some time, and then we'll get airborne. Okay, here we are. We've just been cleared for takeoff. So it's runway heading to 5,000, and then we'll get going here. Get lined up on the runway. And toga. T's and P's are good. Okay, autopilot's on. There's 1,000 feet. We'll bug up. And airspeed's increasing. Get the flaps to 1. And the flaps up. And let's say we've been cleared direct to the initial waypoint, which is EGTAS. So we'll go to the legs page, direct EGTAS, execute. And we got flaps up, no lights. And we're showing climb thrust level change up to 5,000 feet. And say we've been cleared up to a higher altitude, 10,000. So there we go. So climb thrust level change up to 10,000. After takeoff checklist. Engine start switches. Landing gear lever. Auto brake. So after takeoff checklist. Gear is up. Flaps up, no lights. Ignition switches are off. And looks good. And we're on our way to initial fix of IGTAS, and we're going to climb up to 35,000 feet. So we can set that as well, and we can go VNAV now. Set 35,000 feet. Okay, and looks good. So we're on our way. We got a bit of a ways to go. So I'll check in with you top of climb, after top of climb, and then we'll get it set up for our initial portion of our ETOPS flight here. I'll see you there in a little while. Okay, we're at cruise here. Just abeam St. John's, Newfoundland, which is our ETOPS entry airport. St. John's is just over on this peninsula here. So we're going to be about 20 miles, 30 miles north of that. Weather looks pretty good there, so let's hop in the aircraft and take a look at our route and our setup for the ETOPS portion. So our oceanic segment starts at Joppy. And if I bring up the flight plan here, you can see Joppy is the entry for the oceanic. And so normally you get your oceanic clearance from Gander Center coming this way, and from Shanwick coming the other way. And this is the oceanic boundary between Gander and Shanwick. So that's the halfway point. So you may have to make sure you have your clearance prior to entering oceanic airspace. And then we also need to just get set up for our ETOPS portion of our flight, because that's our ETOPS portion of our flight. I'll show you on the ND here. If I range out, remember we put in that St. John's, and we put in that distance of 394, and that's based on single engine, zero wind cruise performance for the 737. And so that represents our ETOPS entry point. So we need to have our ETOPS portion of our flight set up prior to that. And we need our oceanic clearance prior to Joppy. So let's say we have our oceanic clearance from Gander Center, and we're cleared to cross cleared our flight plan route along the NAT track that we filed from Joppy, and we're cleared to maintain flight level 350 and 0.78. So prior to going oceanic, another thing you need to do is, if you go to legs page here, you'll see that our so let's say we're cleared at 0.79. That's pretty close to what our econ is. So we need to you see that vary slightly as your fuel weight changes and based on the atmospheric conditions. So you need to actually, for the oceanic portion, you do a fixed Mach cruise. So the way you rectify that, you can see that we're in econ cruise. And so if we were cleared to cruise at 78, 79, 80, whatever, probably 79 is probably the maximum you're going to do in this aircraft. So let's say we were clear at 79, so you need to put a fixed Mach cruise of 79 and execute that. Now if you go to the legs page, you'll see 79 is your predicted cruise speed for every portion of the flight. So you need to have that set up before you go. Normally you're going to squawk 2000, so we already have squawk 2000 in. And yeah, that's pretty good. And then we set up our HF radios. And if we go on here, we would set up our HF frequencies if we're talking to Gander Center. And we get ready to do that when we cross Joppy for our first position report. So that's our entering oceanic airspace. And the last thing we need to do is make sure that in this on these NAT tracks, you need to have a RMP of 10 or less. So we're RMP 2 right now. So as long as we're RMP 2, that's fine. It's within 10. You can set 10 there as a limit, but RMP 2, you can leave RMP 2 is fine. And it might auto switch as soon as it makes that thing, but you have to make sure that RMP is at least 10 for the oceanic segment. Okay, so that's our oceanic portion. So now we're going to set up our ETOPS portion. We got lots of time to do that, but we might as well set it up now. So if you remember from the flight plan, we have the waypoints. So the first one we're going to do is the ETP waypoint, which is north 51036, west 035 20.2. So that's what I'm going to use when I set this up in the nav display. So ETP1, now the way we normally do this in the 737 is we go to the index page and we go to nav data, and you can basically, if I put in JOPY, for example, JOOPY in this, it's going to show me the nav information, latitude, longitude, and variation for that waypoint. Normally you can put in, so normally when I go back, so if I go to nav data again, and if I put in a waypoint that doesn't exist, that's not in the nav database, and normally we would put in ETP 01, ETP 02 would be our waypoints. And normally if I put that in, because ETP 01 is not a nav data waypoint, so ETP 01, normally when you put that in here, you get blank for your lat longs. And then you can enter your lat longs and execute that and create a waypoint, but it's not going to allow us to do that. So for some reason that's not set up here, so we will have to set up that in a different way, and I'll show you here in a second. So we'll just get back out of that. We'll get back to the legs page, and we're going to look and see where, I'm not sure why I was doing this little bit of maneuvering here prior to, it got left of course for some reason. We are in LNAV. Yeah, that all looks okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to enter ETP1, and ETP1 on our flight plan occurs after the lat long of 50 north, 40 west. So if we go down to, there's 50 north and 40 west is represented by 5040 north. So what we can do is we can enter in the lat long for ETP1 after that waypoint. So the lat long was north 51036, so we just put that in our scratch pad, north 5103.6, and then west oh no, sorry, I had the wrong waypoint. North 51036, and then west 035202. 035202.2. So that is the waypoint, and if I line select that below the waypoint that it's supposed to be after, it creates a waypoint, waypoint 1. And if I look on my ND here, I'm not going to be able to see that, it's a little bit out of range, but we'll assume that's correct. And then if I bring that now next waypoint below it, so I got 5040 November waypoint 1, which is our ETP 01, and then 5230 November is our next waypoint, and I'll just show you that on the flight plan so you can see that there's 5040 north, and we got ETP 1, and then we got 5230 after that, so 5230. So that looks good. So if I execute that, and now I put a fix WPT01 on the fix page, and it will show up in the flight plan anyway, but I'll just make it a fix. So WPT, and that's the default for when you create a waypoint. It just calls them WPT01, so on. And so we go back to the legs page, and now if we look at our plan route here, And if we step through, so there's our ETOPS entry based on the line, and there's WPT1, which is our ETP1 point. So that represents now, if we go to our map here, so we've got our ETOPS entry point, and ETP1 is halfway between ETP2 and our waypoint there, 40 north, 50 north, 40 west. And that shows up on our nav display pretty good there. So now we've got the next waypoint, and then we're going to have to put in ETP2 now, and then we should have them both there, and then we'll use those for our navigation and fuel checks as we go across for our ETOP segment of our flight. So we still got a ways to go. I'll put in the next waypoint, and first thing we do, we just passed Joppy, so we could do our first position report, and I'll just show you how we do that. So I'll go back to map here, and we'll go to position or prog page, and when you do a position report, if you're doing a VATSIM flight across the pond, you do a position report. This is what you use for doing your position report. So you go position Joppy, time 1616 Zulu, flight level 350. Estimate for the next waypoint is 49 north, 50 west at 1626, and next waypoint is 50 north, 40 west, and that's where you get your information for your position reports. So that's how you make your position report at Joppy, and you'd be doing that over your HF radios, or maybe still over VHF because you're close enough to St. John's. You could still be talking to Gander on VHF. Okay, so that's that. So now I'll go offline, and I'll just finish setting up the ETP2, and then we'll look at what we do once we, our next portion, once we enter our ETOPS portion of our flight, which is at the line here at the 394 from St. John's. So I'll see you there or in a little bit. Okay, we're just coming up to the ETOPS entry point off of St. John's, which is 1 hour single engine flying time from St. John's. And let's go down to our ND here. And waypoint 1 represents ETP1. I put in waypoint 3 here, which is the lat long that the flight plan gave us for the ETOPS entry point off of St. John's. And you can see they're fairly close. I'm not sure what the criteria is for how they determine the 1 hour flying distance from St. John's, but our company SOPs, we use 394 still air distance from the ETOPS entryway airport. So they're fairly close, but I just put it in there for reference. You can choose to use that and put that waypoint in for your ETOPS entry point. So waypoint 3 would be ETOPS entry point. I'm using the green line here, which represents the 1 hour flying time from St. John's on one engine. So when you, just before entering ETOPS, a couple checks you want to do. So you want to confirm that your weather is still suitable for your ETOPS alternates. So in this case, we want to check the weather for lodges and the weather for Prestwick, which is our ETP alternates, and the weather for St. John's for returning back to St. John's if we need to. So we check all that, make sure the weather is still suitable. And then we want to check fuel, and you're going to be checking fuel throughout your entire flight here. So if we reference the flight plan, our last waypoint fuel check was, if I look at the progress page here, at 49 north, 50 west was 29.3, and if we go onto our flight plan here, so at 49 north, 50 west, we need it 28.7, so we had an excess of 0.6, so 600 pounds of fuel. So we would just monitor all these waypoints, make sure that we're always ahead of fuel on all these waypoints. But then for ETOPS, you also need to, if I go down to the ETOPS portion of the flight plan, and we have critical fuel requirements for each point. So at the ETOPS entry, in order for us to fly single engine back to St. John's, we need a minimum of 9.6 thousand pounds to do that, and our estimated fuel on board is going to be well above that. So at the start it's not a big deal, But you always want to make sure that you're going to meet your critical fuel requirements. So at ETP1, in order for us to proceed to the Azores, we need to have 16.1 thousand pounds of fuel, and you can see our predicted fuel. So as long as our fuel is above the critical, so you need to check at all these points that you're going to meet the critical fuel requirements to continue on to do your ETOPS. So that's what we're checking when we're doing the ETOPS segment. So we're coming up to the ETOPS entry point now. I'll just zoom out here, and when we cross this line, now we're going to be in the ETOPS segment. So for the first portion, until we reach ETP1, and if you remember on our flight plan here, ETP1 is based on, if we, prior to ETP1, we are going to go back to St. John's. So that's going to be our ETOPS alternate. And then once we pass ETP1, it's going to be off to lodges in the Azores. So right now we're in the ETOPS, entering the ETOPS segment, and if we have any emergency or a diversion or lose an engine or anything, we're going to proceed back to St. John's. And once we pass this waypoint 1, which represents ETP1, then we're going to proceed on to lodges. And then once we get to ETP2, which is this portion here, so between there, we're going to go to lodges. But once we get past ETP2, we are going to continue on to our next ETOPS alternate, which is going to be Prestwick. So that's basically how the ETOPS portion of the flight works. And that allows us to basically continue on outside the normal operating range of the nearest suitable airports to do this oceanic segment. So so now we're in the ETOPS portion. We'll continue on, and I'll check in with you, and we'll just do another fuel check, see how things are going when we reach ETP1 at waypoint 1. And I'll see you there in a little bit. Okay, we're just coming up on ETP1, and again we're going to check our fuel. So it's pretty straightforward. We're not halfway yet, and we have lots of gas right now, 23.1. So fuel is not an issue, and on a lot of these ETOPS segments where you have multiple, when you were doing ETOPS 120 and you have multiple ETOPS alternates like we do today, fuel is usually not critical. But there is occasions where there will be a requirement to carry extra fuel because you're not going to have enough fuel. If you don't carry extra fuel when you get to an ETOPS equal time point, you're not going to have enough fuel to divert to your ETOPS alternate. And in that case, you're going to have to carry extra fuel, which is what's called the ETB or ETOPS build fuel for diversion. And you're not going to see it on these type of routes where you have multiple ETPs. You're only doing ETOPS 120. But if you're doing ETOPS 180 and you don't have very many ETPs, you could have a segment towards the end of your flight, like the last segment, where you're going to require extra fuel in order to be able to divert to your ETOPS alternate on one engine. And that's what's going to require an ETP build. So when you have that in your flight plan, you're going to have to really monitor your fuel, make sure that you're going to have that amount of fuel prior to that last ETOPS segment. And it's the same thing. So we're crossing ETP1 here, and we're going to look on our flight plan, and at ETP1 our critical fuel is 16.1. We're supposed to have 20.4, and we're supposed to have 22.4, and we have 23, so we're still carrying the 600-pound excess, and it's looking pretty good, and we have our critical fuel. But like I said, on some ETOPS segments you will need to carry extra fuel in order to meet that last equal time point critical fuel requirement. Anyway, that's crossing ETP1. So normally when we cross those fixes, we just go into the fix page and we delete them. And then our next one is going to be ETP2, which is right close to our next waypoint on our flight plan here. And I'll just zoom in here and show you. So on our flight plan, we just crossed ETP1, ETP2, is next, and that's so right now if we divert, we have to divert. We're going to divert uh, to the Azores until we pass ETP2, which will be our next diversion airport, which will be Prestwick. And you can see on the map here that ETP2 is right close to our next waypoint, which is 52 north, 30 west, which is the oceanic boundary for switching to Shannon. So if I go on the so there's the oceanic boundary for Gander and Shanwick. And so what you do is you switch when you get to that waypoint. So you do your communications with Gander till you're at this halfway point, and then you switch over to Shanwick, which is out of Ireland, for the next waypoint, next portion of your oceanic flight. Okay. And as you can see, I put our ETOPS exit point, which is based on Shannon Airport. And that's the green line for that just starting to show up on our flight plan page. Okay, so I'll check in with you now when we get to ETP2, and we'll just double check our fuel again and make sure everything's looking good, and then we'll get to our exit point, and then we're done our oceanic segment. Hope it's not too complicated. I just wanted to give everybody a kind of overview of how we're able to do these oceanic flights in twin-engine airplanes. It's been quite common now for quite a few years that you used to always just see the wide-body airplanes doing these oceanic flights, but it's been quite common for quite a while now that you see a lot more narrow-body aircraft doing these flights. Okay, so I'll check in with you at the next waypoint, and we'll just do another fuel check there. See you in a little bit. Okay, we've just passed our ETP2 waypoint, and again we're going to go to the flight plan and check that our critical fuel, so we go to the flight plan here. We need 15.8 as our critical fuel to be able to divert to Prestwick, which is now our ETOPS alternate. And we're predicted to be 20.1, so we have 20.9 or 20.8. We're just still maintaining that excess 700 pounds now, and we are above our critical fuel, so we're good to proceed on. No issues, and we can delete that fix out of our page here as well. And when we go to the range out, our next waypoint is going to be the ETOPS exit point, and I put that in just based on Shannon Airport, EINN, and a 394 mile range ring around that to represent our ETOPS exit point. So, and then we exit oceanic at waypoint Mallet. So everything's looking pretty good on our oceanic flight so far. So I'll check in with you when we hit the ETOPS exit point, and then we'll talk about the arrival into Glasgow or into Edinburgh. So I'll see you there in about another hour or so, I think, till we get to just under an hour till we get to ETOPS exit point. Okay, I'll see you there in a bit. Before we get to the ETOPS exit point, just show you another little thing you can do with your fixed page here, just for some situational awareness. So right now our ETOPS alternate is Prestwick, and before that it was lodges in the Azores. So let's say it was still lodges and we roughly wanted to know which direction that airport was. Well, if we put the lodges fix in one of the empty fix pages there, so it's Lima Papa, Lima Alpha. Lima Papa, Lima Alpha. And right now it is a bearing of 007 from us. So if you put in a bearing of, say, 010, that should be ahead of us. So you put that radial in. That line represents direct to lodges if you follow that line. So now if you had to divert to lodges, you're having an emergency, you lose an engine, you want to start your diversion right away because you don't want to waste time going in the wrong direction. You can just kind of turn parallel to that line. You don't have to intercept that line, you can just kind of turn in that general direction. to get going, start dealing with your emergency procedure, and then once you get time to set up your FMC to divert to the alternate airport, then you can you're at least going in the right direction. So that's a good visual representation. Same thing, we can do it for Prestwick, EGPK. So if I change it to EGPK, and you can see the radial from there is, we're on the 268 radial. So if I go, say, 270, and so probably not a great line, so I want to go something from here. So I can change this radial so I can get a line that kind of represents. So if I make that, say, 250, there we go. So now if I had to divert to Prestwick, I could just kind of parallel this line, and as I get closer I can update that so that it comes closer to where I am on this track. But it's just a good visual representation to give you a rough heading to turn towards. And so I would go heading select, kind of roughly turn towards that heading and deal with my emergency. And then, so you have to deal with the emergency first, get that all cleaned up, and then you're going to navigate, set up your FMC to get going in the right direction. But this gives you a nice, quick, easy way to facilitate going in the right direction when you have to divert to one of your ETOPS alternates. Anyway, just thought I'd give you that little tidbit prior to getting to the ETOPS exit point. So I'll see you there when we get to the EP or EXP. Okay, we're just coming up on our ETOPS exit point, and at this point we're not in the ETOPS segment anymore, so we just continue along our normal flight. If we have any issues, we can just divert to any suitable airport along our route here. So we just go into our fix page, we can delete the last fix, and yeah, so everything looks good. Now we're just coming up on next point, which will be the exit oceanic airspace. So we're still in the Shanwick oceanic airspace here. When we get up to this waypoint Mallet, that's going to be exiting the oceanic airspace, and we'll be talking to Shannon Center. So we'll just go through that, and then next is going to be our arrival in Over Island and up into Edinburgh. So I'll talk to you again when we get close to Mallet, and we'll just go through the setup for exiting oceanic airspace, and then we'll complete up our trip into Edinburgh. See you there in a bit. Okay, we're coming up to the end of our oceanic segment at Mallet, and at this point you would contact Shannon Center on the assigned frequency given to you by Shanwick Oceanic on VHF. So you tune the appropriate VHF frequency and give them a call, and they'll usually give you another squawk. Oh, where's our traffic? Okay, so yeah, you get your assigned squawk back from ATC there, and you could put in whatever they assign you, 2323. And last thing you can do is, well, if you set RMP 10 here, so it's still RMP 2, but if you set 10, you can set 10 by going here, and then just verify that. So you see RMP 10 shows up. Well, if you did set it, you'd have to delete it and go back to your regular RMP requirements. And the last thing you can do is cruise. You can go to Econ Cruise because you were in a fixed Mach cruise for the crossing. So you can go back to Econ, and that's going to give you back to 0.8, and there you go. So that's your exiting the oceanic, and now we're just going to continue in for our arrival into Edinburgh. So I'll finish off. I'll just show you the landing in Edinburgh when we're completed there. This is basically just going over ETOPS, mostly ETOPS flying. Hope it wasn't too complicated. I tried to keep it simple, but if you're going to do an across the pond flight, and even in a narrow body aircraft, that's how you should look at ETOPS overall. Basically, it can be generated in your flight plan for you with the with SimBrief, and then you get all the required information you need to properly execute ETOPS portion of an oceanic flight. And you can do these crossing the Atlantic. Another common one is from the western west coast of the United States and Canada. You can do, and from Alaska even down to Hawaii. That's usually requires ETOPS 180. And you can do those as well for ETOPS flights as well, and they'll generate those in SimBrief as well. Anyway, I hope it was helpful. Give you a little bit of an insight into how ETOPS works and how to manage it and how it's flight planned, and not obviously not covering everything, but I think it should be helpful for your across the pond trips in your simulator. Okay, so we'll just do the landing when we get to Edinburgh. That'll be a little while. I'm not going to go over all the setup. We'll do that on another flight. And yeah, we'll just finish up in Edinburgh. So I'll see you there in a little bit. Hey, we're just on the initial approach portion of the ILS coming into Edinburgh. Just broken cloudy skies, a little bit windy out of the west. Nice evening, just in time for the sunset. I'll just show you which approach we're flying here quickly. We're just coming in on the transition for the ILS onto runway 24. And you can see that's all loaded in the FMC here, so we're just going to come in, join the arc here for the ILS 24, and yeah, looks pretty good. Weather's not too bad, so I'll just check in with you short final, and we will carry out the landing and call it a day. See you there in a few minutes. Okay, we're on short final, and landing checklists and start switches are continuous. Speed brakes aren't green light, landing gear is down through green, flaps are 30 green light, line checks complete. There's 1,000 feet, set its approach altitude, 3,000 feet is set. Okay, I think we're all set for the landing. I stay here in Edinburgh. Okay. Disconnect the autopilot. Disconnect the auto throttle. I lined a little bit long there. I'm still getting used to the flare heights on this airplane here. Auto brakes disarm, 60 knots. And welcome to Edinburgh. Well, that's it for today's flight. Hope you enjoyed it. Just trying to cover off a little bit of ETOPS, what it is, and how you can apply it to your across the pond trips. Thanks for joining me. If you new to the channel again, if you like the video, make sure you hit the like button. Really appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, sign up for notifications, and then you'll see more videos like this in the future. Thanks for coming along. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and we'll see you next time on the Bandit Flight Simmer channel. Bandit out.